Hello and welcome to the National World War II Museum's podcast series, Service on Celluloid. Each week, our in-house experts sit down with special guests to discuss depictions of World War II on film. Sit back and get ready for a lively debate that will reveal the good and bad of how Hollywood shows the 20th century's most dramatic event. My name is Seth Paradin, historian and digital content manager here at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, Louisiana. And as always, we're sitting down with
Dr. Christelle Lefaucheur, research historian at the Institute for the Study of War and Democracy.
And today our special guests for the episode are Dr. Martin Loicano, Executive Director of the Institute for Study of War and Democracy.
Very glad to be here.
And Kaylee Martin, historian here at the museum.
Thanks for having me.
Today we'll be discussing the 1998 film Saving Private Ryan, directed by Steven Spielberg. This film is set around the Normandy invasion, better known as D-Day, and initially focuses on a company of U.S. Army Rangers set to land on Omaha Beach. Following the landing and the brutal fight to get off the beach, Captain Miller, played by Tom Hanks, is given command of a hand-picked squad to retrieve the sole surviving brother of a family of 4 who is somewhere inland with the scattered airborne drops. Saving Private Ryan stars Hanks, Tom Sizemore as Sergeant Horvath, Edward Burns as Ribon, Barry Pepper as Jackson, and Matt Damon as Private Ryan, among many others. The movie was a tremendous commercial and critical success, nominated for a total of 11 Academy Awards and winning 5, including Best Director for Steven Spielberg. So to get our discussion started, our first question that we always ask is, and I'll pose this to you, Christelle, how accurate is Saving Private Ryan?
Well, I will say pretty accurate, especially the first 20 and so minutes, and its depiction of the landing on Omaha Beach, specifically the dark green sections. The bitter fight with the Germans, the very, very, very high casualty that the first divisions and the Rangers, among others, experienced. Yes, it's always a couple of details. I've been reading that the being shot by a bullet in the water was probably not as likely. There's lots of physics against that. But altogether, I think this is a very impressive first scene.
I would agree with that. I think that's easily the most well-known scene in that movie is the first 20 or so minutes, and that, as you said, it depicts the landing on Dark Green sector of Omaha Beach, and that a lot of the details from that scene were taken from a guy that we knew here at the museum quite well, Dr. Harold Baumgarten. He wrote a book called Eyewitness Omaha Beach, and Spielberg used that as the base for his research for that opening scene. So a lot of the stuff that you see that Captain Miller sees, that Tom Hanks' character sees in the movie, are some of the things that Hal saw, that he related to, like including the guy bending down to pick up his severed arm, and the guys coming out of the Higgins boat on fire from the flamethrower. One assumes the flamethrower exploding inside the boat, and those are things that Hal saw. So a lot of that stuff is very accurate to his memories, his personal memories, and that's pretty cool in my opinion anyway.
There's a lot of the logistic. I think Kaylee can talk about that, about the tanks just not making it, and others. You want to?
One of the things I thought was interesting is they actually get a mix of units landing on the beach. So they show the Naval Beach Battalions, and a lot of people aren't familiar with that are landing. And then the mix of the 29th Infantry Division with the Rangers. So I think they did a good job of depicting the mix of units landing, and that's not something you always see.
Also the fact that in that particular section, especially on Omaha Beach, the naval gunfire support had just not been very successful. So unlike the other sections or the other beaches, they arrived and the Germans were pretty much standing and ready to defend very fiercely. And so that was also very well. They picked, of course, this particular section, this particular beach, because it hadn't been as successful.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. One of the things that's most interesting about it, and I think it's because it's from that man-on-the-ground's perspective, you can't even tell whether it's German incoming or American incoming artillery, mortars. There's so much chaos, and I think that it really captures the mood, the experience in such a powerful way. And it doesn't really bother me about that scene that there's little things that are not quite right tactically. You know, the German machine gun nest is up there. That MG-42 is just pounding away at a rate that is just not possible for that weapon. It would have melted down in about 60 seconds flat. There's no infantry flanking that position, but none of that takes away from this overall mood and the reality, the panic, the fear, the confusion from that infantryman's point of view. And this is why I've always thought this is really some of the best teaching footage to get people a sense of what combat in the Second World War was like on that day.
I would agree with that 100%. I think you drove home the perfect word, chaos, and because that's what it is. When those guys land, I mean, nothing goes to plan. You know, I mean, they drop the ramp of the boat, and you know, your first 8-10 guys in that boat are slaughtered, and they start going over the sides, and then guys are drowning. I mean, all these things happen, you know. And then when they get on the beach, all the plans are gone. You know, they're all thrown into the fan. I mean, it's over with. You're just trying to survive, and you're trying to get to that shingle to get. I think one of the lines is, one of the soldiers on the beach asks Captain Miller, "What do we do now?" And he says, "Get the hell off the beach," or I don't remember exactly what he says, but something along those lines. What's the rallying point? And he says, "Anywhere but here." And I mean, you know, that's very, very true. I agree that there's no way a 42 could have ripped off 5,000 rounds without changing the belt or the barrel of that weapon without it melting down. And then two, you know, I read that Spielberg tried to pick a stretch of beach that looked like Omaha Beach, and I think it's somewhere in Ireland. I don't remember. Maybe one of y'all knows where in Ireland, but it was a beach in Ireland, and I think I've been to Normandy. I know you have, and it does look like Omaha Beach to a point, and the defenses don't.
No.
You know, and that's one of the big strikes for me is that there were no huge concrete. They'd have been, you know, like we were saying, they'd have been targets for 14-inch naval rifles within seconds. But
and the one problem I had with the beach is that it's not nearly as wide as it actually was.
Right.
It doesn't really do justice to how far those guys had to go to get to safety, or relative safety of the shingle and the cliff there. But you understand in a film, you can't have them on the beach for that long. So it's one of those things that you understand. They have to adjust that, but it wasn't nearly as wide. If you've been there at low tide, it's a very long way to go.
Yeah. And I think really it's a good moment to talk about the cinematography. I think everybody praises the film for this particular scene, and it's very interesting the decision that Spielberg made with his cinematographer, which is going with handheld camera, working. Okay, so the sound effect, we talked about that, are very impressive. I read that they wrapped a dead cow and then put a military uniform and then shot bullet through it to try to get the sound of bodies being impacted, for example. But also, I don't know if you noticed the kind of washed-out colors. Mm-hmm. So they use this unfiltered lenses. Really, like there's no beautifying, Hollywood beautifying of what's happening, which we know plenty of war movies where it's so beautifully lit and everything looks, you know, not the coif, but everything looks so nice. And here you get this visceral sense, the chaos that we talked about. There's a few things like, you know, they broke one of the cardinal scene of filming, which is making the presence of the camera aware by having water and blood splashing on the camera, which should have been this big moment of, wait, there's a camera there, you're not in there. But I think it did the exact opposite, like you felt like it was just washing on you. So this is just all those little, really attention to details that make this scene just, you feel like you're in it. And we know, of course, that it's based on, you know, accounts of survivors. So I think it's a very, very impressive scene.
One of the things that Spielberg had said he wanted to do was take the viewer, put the viewer on Omaha Beach. And I think, like when you said when the camera is splashed with blood and water and sand and whatever else, it does. It puts you there in that moment. I mean, I watched the movie last night. I've seen it, I don't know how many times, a ton of times. And I remember the first time I watched it in the theater, that first 20 minutes, I didn't realize it till afterwards that I was gripping the side of my chair. I was white-knuckling it the first 20, 27 minutes of that film. And you didn't realize it because it was so intense. And last night I watched it. And again, I've seen it a dozen times at least. And through that first 20 minutes of the movie, I just sat there transfixed on the sofa watching this again because, you know, even though I know exactly what's going to happen, it's very, 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 very gripping.
One last point, sorry. What's interesting also is that we do have very few, but there are a few footages from British film companies, almost none from American, and it just doesn't give you the same impact. So it's interesting that in order to give a good sense of what the experience had, you have to basically stage it. So I've been reading about that with how the film crews that were there were asked do not have handheld and everything needs to be static, which then turns the whole experience into a film. And Spielberg went the other way. So it's interesting. You have to add the extra artifice in order to create the impression of a real experience. But yeah, beautiful, magnificent scene, really.
Excuse me.
Now let's move on to the rest of the movie.
Well, yeah, I mean,
It's hard to beat that.
I
really
think there are two movies really. There's this opening one, as part A, which is I agree, and I think people here at this table sometimes use film to teach, and will never ever use the entire film.
No.
And we use just this first one, and then that's it, and the rest we are falling into tropes of.
It's cowboys and Indians.
Yes, it's pretty much that,
Yeah,
and
it's cowboys and
it's
Indians.
really too bad.
It is, but I like the pivot. I like the pivot where the guys get up on the top of the hill, and they are not archetypical heroes. They're gunning down Germans who are surrendering. I mean, and I don't think it's shot or it's portrayed in a judgmental way. I think it's a really powerful piece that their experience on that beach was so overwhelming and so profound and just essentially had them in such shock that they're not thinking about anything other than killing the people who've been killing them and their friends. And that's such a powerful transition scene, I think. And I agree, it gets a little bit oversimplified from that point. But I really like that piece immediately after the beach is recognizing that even these decent men did awful things in the wake of that experience, because it just goes beyond any ability to process or deal with in any way at that time.
That's a perfect segue into something we need to talk about, is the depictions of the Germans in this film. And I think, that's one of the scenes that really sticks out to me is, as far as I know, and I could be wrong, but I've seen a lot of World War II movies. I think that's the first movie that ever showed an American shooting a surrendering soldier in cold blood. They just blasted those guys right there and didn't care. And that's war. We've talked about this before on different things, but that's what war is. It brings out the absolute worst in humanity every single time. And I applaud Spielberg for showing that, because everybody thinks that Grandpa was a hero, and while he may have been, but Grandpa was a killer, and that's how we won the war, and that's how wars are fought. And it showed that, I think, that a lot of times the Americans weren't really much different, and maybe I'll get some flack for this, but the American soldiers really weren't much different than the German soldiers that were defending that beach. They were there to do a job.
Survival.
And survive and protect your buddy to the left and to the right of you, and that's it. They weren't fighting for apple pie and mom. And so again, I'm getting kind of off track, but what do you think about the depictions of the Germans in here? In this movie?
I felt they're kind of downplayed in a way. You don't see a lot of them. You see in the opening scenes once they get on the beach, once they get up the hill. And then when they run into Steamboat Willie at the radar station, but you don't get a lot of up-close and personal interaction with the Germans. They are kind of a distant enemy, I would say. And I thought that was interesting but that's kind of how a lot of the fighting was. This is one of the times that you're not marching neatly in a line face to face. It's not like trench warfare. You're going over the top and you're facing this line of enemy. You're stumbling upon them. You may not see them. You come around a corner, and there they are.
Yeah, I agree. One thing that really, I think a few of us around the table speak German. I was really, really disappointed that did not translate to German, although I understand, because this was the experience of the soldiers. So you encounter whoever, and they're screaming at you, and you don't know what they're saying. There's, right when they come up the top, there's actually two soldiers that raise their hand, and they're Czech soldiers. Mm-hmm. The language is different. It's not German. This is Czech, and they say, I haven't. So they say in Czech, they say, I haven't shot anybody. I'm not German. I'm Czech. And then they just mow down. And the soldiers are laughing about that, which again, I'm not criticizing them for that. So I'm torn. I understand the thinking behind is this is the experience of those American soldier who did not speak German, so the sound came to them that way, this kind of guttural, typical Germans, which I think just, the scene when the wall fell off, there's just a screaming match, is so cliched German. The German is, has a barking sound. The German has this ordering, halt, whatever. But I think, they could have the scene where I wish they had found a way in terms of the script to give us a translation is, the close encounter with Mellish. I think where, they go from fighting with weapons to hand to drawing the knife and then slowly putting in his heart. And I think it's such an intimate moment. And what the German is saying is, just don't fight it off. It will make it easier if you don't fight off. And there's this weird, I don't know, there's this weird closeness in him trying to do that. And the sound of his voice is actually very soft in that moment. I'm not saying he's being a nice guy, because of course he's, but I wish, I don't know, I had some issue with the lack of translation for American audience.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, what do you guys think?
Yeah, no, I agree, because I studied German, so I understand what he's saying, and I think that's part of the reason that scene is hands down the hardest for me to watch.
Yeah.
I could watch the first 20, 30 minutes over and over. I hate watching that scene.
Yeah.
And I think because it is so intimate. And on the beach, it's impersonal. This guy is shooting at you from, 100 yards, 200, 300 yards away. You don't see him. And there's something so intimate and so personal about that scene. And I agree that if you understand what the German is saying to him, it just makes it that much more shocking or just difficult to watch. And I agree. I think you lose a lot if you don't understand what the German's saying to Mellish at that point.
And I have to say, quick criticism here. Of all the team members that Spielberg could have picked, of course he picked Mellish, who is a Jewish soldier, who is being stabbed in the heart by a German. It's just like...
In the SS.
Yes. Yeah. It's like... I don't know. I think this is one of the moments that is so manipulative in terms of like loading tons of symbolism and meaning onto one thing that I'm just saying, this is just too much. Just don't do that.
And would you extend that metaphor all the way, though, to the inaction of the companion soldier who just refuses to intervene?
Upham? Okay.
Paralyzed with fear.
We need to talk about Upham.
Definitely.
We're going to get to Upham. We're going to get to Upham. But I thought that the depiction of the Germans in this movie was...
cardboard.
Yeah, they were mindless robots.
Yes, yes.
And they weren't, I knew German veterans, and they weren't mindless robots, and it was your stereotypical portrayal of the German soldier. It was just this,
and
they're Nazis. No, they're not. They're
casting,
Germans.
The casting. I mean, most of them in close-up looked like this big guy,
Monsters.
Strong figures, Aryan type. And I was like,
shaved heads. Every one of them had a shaved head.
A lot of them, yeah.
Which is a bunch of baloney.
Yes, exactly. And it's like, yes, again, so I don't know if Spielberg was shooting for this is the perception. You in the middle of fighting and you have
I
those
think
and
totally,
whatever,
yeah.
they look scary, so you project whatever onto them. But yeah, I think it's too bad that he had an opportunity here to kind of fine-tune a little bit the depictions of German and he didn't.
Yeah. Well, does this movie, this sounds like a closing question, but it certainly is not, but does this movie portray the war as it should be portrayed? And I'll answer that one because that was my question, is yes. I think it does. The first 20, parts of it.
Yeah.
Let me be abundantly clear. The first 20 minutes of the movie, the Omaha Beach scene, yes. Utter chaos, extreme violence, flesh-tearing, bone-shattering, just visceral nightmare. Yeah, that is how war should be portrayed. And then there's other instances in the movie that are just, you scratch your head and you go, come on. I mean, nobody would have done that. Like when they go into the town and Caparzo, disobeys Captain Miller's orders to get the little girl because it, quote, reminds him of his niece, unquote. Yet he's standing in the middle of an open street where there's known to be snipers and he takes one through the chest. I mean, any well-trained, I'm not saying that there's a momentary lapse of discipline or a momentary lapse of judgment, sure. But, I mean, come on. I mean, there's things that it's like, Jesus, God, there's no way that would have.
Especially with an elite unit like the Rangers.
Yeah.
They're elite. And as far as we know, they're all seasoned. This isn't their first
Theoretically,
combat.
anyway, yeah.
Catherine Pass.
yeah.
We know they've been
Yeah.
to.
So
He's collecting the sand.
The
So we
sand,
see
right.
he was in
Mhm.
North Africa, Sicily, Italy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now they made it.
They've
They
been
survived
around, yeah.
Normandy. Yeah, they would not have
Some
made
rookie
that
mistakes,
mistake.
for sure.
It's just some of that stuff is really goofy. But then again, you talk about the combat scenes, like the Mellish scene,
Mm-hmm.
or the even the scene where one of the I don't think he has a name, but the paratrooper who tries to stick the IED, for lack of a better term, on the wheel of the Tiger,
Uh-huh.
and he just boom, he's blown up right
Yeah.
then and there. Or when they turn that 20 millimeter flak on those troopers who are trying to get inside that tank and heads come off and arms are being blown. I mean, yeah, that's what a weapon that size
Yeah.
would do to a human body.
But at the same time, talking about ridiculous things, one of the things when I watch that is, why are there 8 guys on that tank?
Right, yeah,
8 guys exposed.
right.
So it's like you do these great things that are, very realistic, and then you do things that, just like you said, they're head scratchers. Why do you have 8 guys on that tank exposing
and
themselves?
you have this juxtaposition of, like you
Yeah.
just said, guys getting blown apart, but the Captain Miller character can take about 15 bullets and still have a fairly significant conversation with Private Ryan before he cacks out.
Right.
I mean, it just sort of like your actor billing depends on how long it's going to take you to die, and that was kind of an unfortunate device in a movie that otherwise, I mean, I would have liked to have seen somebody with a big name just boom, gone. It doesn't happen. I mean, you fall into stereotypes when you're an important part of the story, and they surrender so much of that reality to enable the narrative that sometimes it really hurts.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of inaccuracies in this movie, and as far as the accuracy is concerned, again, I think most of the combat scenes are, in my opinion anyway, are very accurate. But then there's a lot of inaccuracies as well, and we'll get to that in a minute. But Christelle, you mentioned Corporal Upham. Let's talk
Yes.
about him. Spielberg said that he most closely identified with Corporal Upham, which I don't think that's necessarily a good thing to say, frankly, but that's just my opinion.
I don't know. For me, it's a very it's a negative character, and I think in the sense of also piled up a lot of cliches about the meek intellectual. He's obviously, an intellectual. He speaks different language. He likes Edith Piaf. He likes French music. And what does he end up doing? He's frozen by war. So on one hand, yes, you could applaud Spielberg for showing soldiers that have this experience, which of course happen. But on the other hand, the way he sets it up is that this is not a trained soldier. He just did basic training, never shot a rifle. So you almost expect him to do that. And he piled so many cliches. Upham has this idolized version of the war that he only knows through books and movies. And you say, oh, this is about forging bonds of brotherhood. And they're like, the real guy, they have the experiences, of course, laugh and make fun of him and trying to... And then again, the fact that he's identified with somebody who reads books, somebody who's an intellectual. And then you put those guys in the war and looks what happened. Which then you have that balance with Miller, who's also, you could argue, he's
an English
an
teacher.
intellectual because he's an English teacher. But then, I don't know, I was very unhappy with Upham. And I applaud the depiction of him as being completely frozen, unable to do anything. And the randomness of course, he's one of the survivor. I don't know. The character did not make a lot of sense to me.
No, I agree. And we just talked about how this is Second Rangers. These are extremely experienced guys with several campaign ribbons. Captain Miller sees this guy as a bumbling idiot, dropping his helmet, dropping his wanting to bring his typewriter, and still makes the decision to bring him along anyway, instead of seeking an alternative. So, I mean, it's almost a forced necessity.
A seasoned commanding officer would have seen that and been like, you know what, no thanks.
Yeah.
We'll
Especially
be
on
all
such
right
a
without
mission.
you.
Yeah.
I think there's an interesting transition in the character, though, for good or bad, and you see that at the end when he sees Steamboat Willie, and it's kind of like he has this change in him, and you almost wonder, like, what would he be like after that? I mean, was that his breaking point that now he's going to be able to stand up and fight, or was that just a moment of weakness? And it's one of those things I always thought was interesting, that for all his don't kill him when they're at the radar station, and then suddenly he doesn't mind dropping him right there as he's surrendering.
He let all the other one go.
Yeah.
Well, he only had 7 shots left in that one.
But he repeatedly, like when the brick wall fell and they uncovered the German, what he's shooting in German is don't shoot, put your weapon down. So he's consistently the one that advocates for not shooting prisoner and finding a different resolution than, through killing. And then you make him kill one guy, but then he let the other one go. And then in the end he survived because what? Is Spielberg saying this is the kind of guy we want to lead now that all the other one are dead? I don't know. It was very...
And that final scene where he wastes that German prisoner, or Steamboat Willie or whatever his name is a bunch of baloney as well. I mean, he's surrounded by 8 or 9 Waffen-SS, including, if you look, a Knight's Cross recipient. So, I mean, come on. Those guys would have kicked his ass up and down the street. And that's just, it's horrible. Upham is despicable, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the physicality of it, too. Of course, they took Jeremy Davis is the name of the actor, who is very skinny. So, again, he doesn't fit any of the typical image of a soldier, and then he's piled on all this characteristic of a non-soldier, Again, an intellectual. I think it's a very negative depiction. No, there's not a good thing about him. No. Even the debate when they argue about, we shouldn't kill him, we don't kill prisoner. He's not making a convincing argument. He's not even winning this argument in the interaction when they're at the radar. So it's like he's ineffective. You could argue, he's part of the reason why Mellish dies. He survives.
Yeah. He is the reason that Mellish dies, yeah.
And it's like, even the German coming down, just like, you're not even worth it.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Here's the same guy who had to eliminate Mellish, and he walks down, looks right at him, and he's like, I'm not even going to bother with you. And keeps on trucking.
You can say, though, in a different way. I agree completely with what you guys say. He's just almost despicable. Mm-hmm. But it can be sort of seen as a symbol for the fact of the randomness, going back to that first scene of who survives, who gets blown apart, who doesn't. You have these capable, amazing soldiers, Captain Miller, Sergeant Horvath, and then they don't make it. And yet this guy, who for no reason should make it, does. And I think you can say that a way of thinking of that is it's that chaos again. There's no predictability. Nothing can protect you from the war. You may live, you may not. So...
Well, it goes to that conversation that he and Miller are having in the church, and he's trying to figure out what, Miller's background, and he says, what's the pool up to? And he says, last I heard about 300, and they go back and forth, and he says, well, I'll give you the answer when it gets to 500, and we'll split the money. And then Upham says, well, why don't we? It's my duty under your command. Why don't we wait till it gets 1,000? And Miller says, well, what if we don't live that long? And he says, 500 is good. That's a good. So that's kind of a little shot there. But what about the impact on veterans and the American public that this movie had? In my opinion, it was profound. It was. This was the first big blockbuster World War II movie in a long time. This movie was made in 98. I can't even really think of a bigger one that had come out in the 10 years previous. If I'm missing one, somebody shout it out, but I don't even recall. And it came out on the heels of Ambrose's D-Day, which I think came out in 94, if I remember correctly. So this is 4 years later, so it's not terribly long after. And America's interest in World War II was picking back up because Grandpa's getting older, Grandpa's dying now. And not coincidentally, this museum was founded a couple of years later. But I think the impact that this movie had on the American veterans, or veterans period, and then the American public was great, and that it brought about the interest in the Second World War again. What do y'all think?
Oh, absolutely. Was it 2-3 years later? You have Band of Brothers, and HBO sunk millions into a miniseries that people still watch today. Is still very, very popular today. And I remember I was younger when the film came out, and I remember hearing all about it. You heard it everywhere. You heard the reactions, and even as someone who wouldn't have gone to see it in the theaters, I was aware of it, and I think it definitely had a major impact. You do hear a lot of veterans say, "Well, after this, I kind of felt like I could tell my story," And I think that in a way, too, the way they portrayed Ryan at the beginning, that clearly, well, you see it at the end, actually, his family doesn't know this story. And so I think a lot of veterans could identify with that. Oh, well, I haven't told my family either, and that's okay. And I think that the way they set that up, having him there with his family, was a very identifiable situation, and for the veterans and for the families. That, oh, Grandpa or Dad might have a story like this. It's incredible that I've never heard.
I agree 100%. I think the opening, the prologue and the epilogue of the movie is sappy.
Yeah.
It is. It's sappy. It's, when I saw it for the first time, I didn't know too many World War II veterans. I saw it in the theater numerous times, and it grabbed me then. But as I've gotten older, and especially after having worked here for as long as I have, you recognize it as being pretty mom and apple pie, very sappy, very yay,
Especially
yay, great
the score.
generation. Yeah, it's melodramatic.
Yeah.
It's melodrama. But what you just said is that, it was very evident that his family had no clue what that man had gone through. And that, I think, is I didn't really think about it until you just said that, but that is a very, very accurate statement from, I can't tell you how many times I heard people tell me after they told me. I never told anybody that. And this is 70 years after the fact. So it was, I almost want to say that movie was kind of cathartic to a lot of veterans, is that it was okay to talk about your nightmares that you'd had, covered for, at that point, 60 years. And in that respect, while the opening and ending is sappy and, playing the world's smallest violin kind of a thing, but it did some good. I really do. I really think it did some good. And for this movie in particular, I think it's actually a good scene. I really do. But that's just my opinion.
That's good. For me, this is really part of a national conversation. The film is more than just a film. You talked about the 80s. The 80s was the decade of the Vietnam movie, and the veteran was depicted as broken and damaged and suffering, and we didn't talk about World War II because we did talk about Vietnam, and you really couldn't get into the war. The Second World War is a real war with suffering and trauma, because it was meant to be the opposite of Vietnam. It was good. We won. Our guys came home and built a country, and I feel that in a sense of how people talk politically and otherwise, and it's a really big part of our national political discussion. That's how this film is so important. It doesn't have to be perfectly accurate. It can work from stereotypes and still achieve that, hey, even the good war is horrible in 1,000 ways, and those men are broken in 1,000 ways because we had to extend our gratitude to them. And I think that's been a good thing for the country ever since.
I would agree with it. That's very well said. What about you, Christelle?
I would agree too with Martin, especially the paying respect or gratitude to the soldiers that fought, the men and women that fought during that war, and coming at that particular time. I would agree. I think the trauma of the Vietnam War, finally was replaced with the last good war that the U.S. had. I had a question though for that table of esteemed historians. Spielberg had said that he used, the true story of Ryan/Nellen as the kernel of truth around which he did a morality play. So what's the moral of the movie? It's something I've been thinking a lot
War
about.
War is bad.
Yeah.
Well, that's a thing. I mean, is it an anti-war movie? I mean, does he manage the almost unmanageable of doing a movie that is anti-war in the sense of showing the senselessness and futility of war, and at the same time, he manages to pay tribute to the soldier?
I think it's a tribute film.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily an anti. Any movie is an anti-war film. I mean, if it's done right, if war is shown for what it really is, and it is in this movie, I think in that respect, to that point, it's an anti-war film. But I think it's a tribute film. I really do. His dad was a World War II veteran. Arnold Spielberg was a CBI veteran, and he made no bones about, his dad was his hero, and his dad's now passed away, but his dad was his hero, and his dad influenced, and his father's experiences in China, Burma, India theater influenced a lot of his life, Steven Spielberg. And I think it was a tribute in a I don't want to say a thank you, but it was a tribute film to the World War II veterans, because they were, and obviously now still are, dying off at a rapid rate, and it was kind of a salute to them. And to that point, what we were talking about earlier, it did good, and that it, like you were saying, Martin, it did good that, it brought about this pouring out of emotion, not just from the veterans, but from the American public as well. Kids, young kids at that time, now adults now, took an interest in the subject, and it brought about this hero worship of World War II veterans, which is good and bad, by the way. But that's another discussion for another day. But, I think for all intents and purposes, it had a very positive effect on the American public and the American veterans. And in that respect, it's good. It's very good. But go ahead.
No, I was going to say, maybe if you have to put kind of a moral or a message, maybe it goes back to Martin's point, is kind of saying they suffered too. So everyone's thinking about the suffering of the Vietnam veterans, and it's a way of saying these guys have been suffering too. Yeah. Don't forget about their suffering. They may have come home, gone on about their lives. They may have never told you about this, but they've been suffering in silence and in secrecy for decades. And it's kind of like, we need to be aware of this.
Understand the price of our political decisions and actions, and that even a good war comes at a terrible price. I think that's something for people that vote for a living in this country to think about.
Again, very well said. So this movie, as we have dubbed it SPR, uses many tropes of classic World War II films, and we kind of talked about this a little bit throughout this discussion, but does it manage to still be unique among World War II films? And I'll answer, but I'll give somebody else a chance to answer first. Does it still manage to be unique?
I think because it was the first of its kind, it does. Mm-hmm. I think if it were made today, after some of the movies we've seen since, some of the ones like Fury that are very much visceral, in-depth, it wouldn't be so unique, but I think it will always stand out because it was really the first of this new genre of World War II and of war films.
Well, what was unique? I mean, do you mean the
depiction of violence?
The hyper-realistic depiction of violence in the opening scene? Okay.
I think so, yeah.
The difference is, like, if you watch Kelly's Heroes, it very much feels like a 70s hippie movie. They're all, oh, whoa, dude, we're fighting the Germans. And it's this very unrealistic depiction of the time. And there's something about Saving Private Ryan, watching it again, it's for one thing, it doesn't feel dated to me. You watch a lot of these films from the 70s, and they're very dated. They're very evident of when they were made. Saving Private Ryan looks like it could have been made 5 years ago and not 20 years ago. And I think that it hits on, was different because, for one thing, it was the details, the accuracy in a lot of the details and the gear, and it looks right and it feels right. And I think that that's what set it apart and kind of set the bar for other war films, is that it's this kind of weird detail accuracy that is there, actually. It's surprisingly there. Some surprising details that they nail. And but it just really set the stage that if you watch any of these other ones, they've got a lot. They kind of try to live up to that level.
Yeah, especially, one other thing I just hearing you talking, the fact that that death is chaotic, it's also slow and painful. Mm-hmm. A lot of previous movie, you were shot, you died, that was it. But here, you just, you see the intestine being out. You hear soldiers crying for their mother, and just so you get again a more realistic depiction of death. Also, a death that is not immediately revenged. A lot of World War II movies, we attacked, we die, and we come back and we eliminate the enemy. Mm-hmm. And here, it's like, well, no, it doesn't work like that. Sometimes it's random, and sometimes, it's going to take us, as we know, take over a year, to really win and end the war. So, I agree. It was war in all its glory.
Well, we talked about, of course, the opening question for every podcast is how accurate is it? And we kind of discussed, we discussed in detail the first 20 minutes of the movie. But the rest of the movie, as far as accuracy is concerned, both historical and tactical, strategic, whatever you want to say, is grossly inaccurate. And I said it's cowboys and Indians, and it is. I mean, it really is. I mean, the P-51s come in at the last minute, like the cavalry.
Yeah.
saving the
And
beleaguered settlers.
This trope of having the metley crew with like every race, ethnic thing. This goes back to 1941. I think 42. One of the first movie in the bomber. I forgot. It was the same thing. A New Yorker, a Jew, an Italian. So we have all the thing, and then they complain and they fight and they question the decisions, but in the end, they get cemented and fulfill the mission.
The great melting pot.
And our Southern boy, we have a Southern boy who's, of course, a
wow.
world-class marksman.
Yes.
And he's a Bible quoter to the entire
Yes.
movie.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's stereotypical backwoods Southern country boy.
And Ryan is from Iowa, which is the heartland of America. So this is such a trope how you put his team together. It was just
some of the other inaccuracies, Kaylee.
Well, I would say geographically, the film's a nightmare. If you're looking at the geographic makeup of the Normandy landings, you're not going to necessarily send guys from Omaha Beach to look for airborne behind Utah Beach, especially once they get to the Murderette River. You're very, very deep behind Utah Beach. And so in that sense, it makes no sense.
Right.
Like, in that regard, it's just absolutely like this. Why?
We talked about the defenses on Omaha Beach.
Yeah.
I've been to Omaha. I think we've all been to Omaha. There's nothing anywhere near that size on Omaha Beach. Dog Green sector at Veerville. The bunkers are still to this day well camouflaged up in the bluffs and along through the draw and everything else like that. And there were no huge concrete monstrosities that were directly facing the sea and all this other baloney. But something that really stood out to me, and I know they tried to correct it in Beyond, not Beyond the Boundaries, but Band of Brothers and the Pacific, was the age of the people in this movie.
Yeah.
Paul Giamatti, we talked about
As
it
a
briefly.
sergeant?
Yeah, well,
He's just a sergeant?
He's a paratrooper, and that guy does not look like a paratrooper.
No.
And then Ted Danson, who was 51 when they made that movie. 51.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Gavin was only 47 or something like that.
And he was a colonel at that time. But then, I know you're chomping at the bit to talk more about the inaccuracies.
No, it's one of the things that's kind of crazy to me is you watch it and there's these weird details and weird random things that they get right. And then they just miss these big points. One of my biggest annoyances with this film is, I think everyone who has heard me talk about it knows, is they mess up the challenge words for the day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that to me is one of those things that from the first time I saw it, I was like, wait, that's wrong. So the challenge was flash.
And then thunder.
And the response was thunder. And they get that backwards throughout the entire movie. And it's just one of those weird things that for some reason it's like, you get these weird details right. Paratroopers taking pockets off their jump jackets and sewing them onto their sleeves. They did that. But then you miss these things like that. It's kind of a random bit, but
they get. I like the fact that they talk about the scattered, airborne troops and the glider. I just finished a work on a glider infantry regiment, and the danger, the very high chances of crashing and how it's depicted. I thought that was kind of insightful and well done.
They'll get that right, and then we'll put snipers in bell towers.
And leave them there. And leave them there.
Yeah, the glider scene is very well depicted. And if you notice, there's the asparagus and the barbed wire strung between the details there, and that's. I think what makes some of the errors more egregious is you've got some of these details in these scenes so beautifully set up, and then you do something like have a 51-year-old enlisted paratrooper.
Well, that and the history's wrong. They had the 101st Airborne. I mean, I know it's a fictional town and all blah, 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 but they got the 101st Airborne holding the bridges over the Murderette. And that was the 82nd at Chef DuPont and, wait for it, Lafayette.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the 101 at all. And it's depicted like that in the movie, and to a point, I think that's, again, God bless them, but that's given a sort of a heroic, godlike status to the 101st Airborne Division, which, not saying that they don't deserve all the recognition that they get, but a lot of people forget the All-Americans, and they fought longer than the 101 did. And the 82nd, good God, from North Africa all to the end of the war. And they're completely ignored in this movie.
The only ones you see
completely
are
ignored.
Corpses.
Are dead guys, yeah. And it's whatever. But the main enemy for Miller, not obviously not on the beach. It's the German army, but it's the 2nd SS Panzer once they move inland. And the 2nd SS didn't get there until, late July, early August?
Yeah,
and they fought the 2nd Armored Division. They didn't fight the Rangers.
Yeah, it's after the German change of command.
Right, yeah. I mean, the 2nd SS was nowhere near, but they had to get the SS in there because they're bad.
Yeah.
They're mean. Or
but they're dumb. They're just like us.
They're
in
mindless
this film.
robots.
They drive their tanks in with no cover.
That
and
was
no,
the next thing I was going to
no
talk about.
flanking, screening. It's like, here, let me just drive my tank into this.
Blitzkrieg tactics, man. You didn't send the tanks down the middle of the damn road inside of a town that you had no intelligence for, that you didn't know that anybody was there. And by the way, 15 guys can't hold up 3 tanks and a small battalion of Waffen-SS Panzer Grenadiers. Doesn't happen. Those guys would have rolled through them, like Patton said, like crap through a goose. They'd have gone through that town so quick that it would not have even, they wouldn't have been a road, they wouldn't have been a speed bump in the road.
And there's also this weird thing where when they gather the leftover soldiers and make a plan, it's unclear how many there are here with Ryan. It looks like there's like a handful, and then when the Germans are coming, it looks like there's way more of them. I don't know where they came from.
Extras.
Yeah, the numbers seem to be shifting. I was like, wait, they were like, I don't know, a dozen, and now it looks like there's a lot of you running around. So yeah.
One of the things that's going back to these Hollywood tropes about World War II films, that's something, again, it's a little detail that's I always find interesting that Hollywood gets wrong, is the dog tags. Mm. You don't remove a dog tag from a body. And so this whole scene where they're going through this bag of dog tags is just totally unrealistic. And it's something that you see, though, in every Hollywood movie. They always do that. And it's just one of those weird things. You talk about these cliches that they pick up. And that was a big cliche that goes all throughout the film. And it's, I guess, unsurprising to see there.
Yeah. There's that one scene where I think it's Robin holds up that one dog tag and it's got the bullet hole right through it. And his remark is, Jesus, look at this poor bastard. It's very, very, very true. Well, I mean, there's a lot of inaccuracies in it, but there's a lot of accuracies as well. I mean, that's with any movie. We've discussed before, I don't think there's any perfect World War II movie, or any war movie for them, World War II or otherwise. But the ultimate question is, did you like it and would you recommend it? And Martin, we'll start with you.
I have to qualify this. It kind of depends on who I'm recommending it to. If you're talking about the community of military historians, then we're going to go as crazy as all of us did watching this film. But if it's somebody any general audience that you say to them, I genuinely want you to understand fundamental, basic, important things about war. Don't get caught up in the story. I just want you to see this visually, viscerally, understand this intensity, understand the potency of every event in war, that is just beyond the real experience that these people have to go through, and understand, especially in this country, that you're the one that put them there. For me, I'm willing to trade off inaccuracies and recommend this film to anybody that's never seen it, because I think anybody that's a citizen should understand what we do, even when we have to, even when the cause is so clearly just and right and proper. That's what I loved about it as a teaching tool, and just as sort of a way to inform our citizenry of the price even of just victory.
Yep. Kaylee?
I agree a lot with what you're saying. I think it does depend on the audience, but I think we can also ask the question is, do the inaccuracies, and we've kind of touched on this, does it really matter as long as people get that understanding and they understand what war is like? That I think especially for these younger generations that are involved, like so caught up in these video games, and it's just this kind of fake world, that if this is something that can show those young people, like, this is a brutal, gruesome thing. It's not just a video game. It's not just, stories in a book that, you can definitely overlook those inaccuracies. But I think it's something that I think people should watch. I think they should watch to understand what these young men went through, and maybe better understand Grandpa, why he was the way he was. And I think that's something that I think most people should see it.
Christelle?
I will totally agree. Yes, I think regardless of historical inaccuracy or weakness in the script, I think it's a seminal movie because of its effort to render the experience of the everyday soldiers. I think we talked about a previous movie that dealt with leadership. I think those movies like Private Ryan, where we had on the grounds with the privates and others, I think those are important. So yes.
Yeah, I agree. What I recommend, like you, Martin, would I recommend it to, professional historians? No. But would I recommend it in terms of seeing it and getting an education? Yes, absolutely. And I don't think Spielberg tried to make a history film. Mm-mm. I will say this, though. I do think the first 20 minutes he did. And for better or worse, I think he scored. I think he did accomplish that goal. He showed, and it hasn't been topped, and it probably never will be, the goriness and gruesomeness of Dog Green sector of Omaha Beach. And that, having known people that were there, I would say that is right. But that wasn't the total purpose of the movie. I think the total purpose of the movie was to, as I said, was a tribute film, and I think people should see it. I debated heavily. My son, I have a 9-year-old son, and he's totally into World War II history, having, yeah, really, I know, shocker there, isn't it? But a little gentle pushing from his father, but he's into it, and genuinely. And I told my wife, I said, I want him to watch this with me. And I could see it in her eyes, like, I don't know. And I did relent, and I did not show it to him because he is only 9. But I want him to understand that war is not little green army soldiers running around the kitchen floor. And, yeah, the ships are really cool looking, and, the guns make a big boom and all that, and the planes are really sexy. But people die, and it's a nasty, horrible thing. And I think maybe 9 might be a little bit too young, but not too much younger. I'll be honest with you, not too much younger. I want him to get it in his head real quick. But, yeah, I'd absolutely recommend this to anybody who hasn't seen it. And I don't think there are too many people who haven't, frankly. But this is a fantastic movie. It really is. And sum it up in one sentence for me if you can.
After a first must-see 20 minutes, the film falls back to generic tropes and finishes as a typical Spielberg film, emotionally manipulative and with overbearing pathos.
Wow. I'm going to just call it a great step in the right direction of depicting war as it is.
I say it's a film that changed all war films.
I agree. I think it's a must see. And sum it up in one sentence, I don't think I really can. It's just something that you have to see. Mm-hmm. And while it is a Cowboys and Indians movie, and it is, you got to see it. And it's a damn good movie. It really is. It's a really good movie. So I think
the first part.
Well, I mean, it has its good points throughout the movie. It really does. We were talking in another podcast about lack of character development. There's a lot of character development in this film. From the conversations with the medic, Wade, and talking about his mom, and then Private Ryan talking about his mom and his brothers, and the famous story of falling out of the ugly tree and hitting every branch down, and all this stuff. There's a lot of character development. It's a good movie. It really is. But I guess that'll do it for this week, and I want to thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to hear more about the events we discussed today, listen to our mini episode next week, where we will share oral histories from those who were there. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Service on Celluloid. Be sure to rate and review us on iTunes if you like what you hear. I'd like to thank everyone who made the podcast possible, our producer, Tessa Jager, and our sound engineer, Jeremy Burson. This has been a production of the National World War II Museum.